Hello, everyone, and welcome to the afternoon session of Warwick Behavioural Science Summit 2021. We will start with a talk by Imen, and Imen is the founder of Gov-tech Start-up Behavioural Science Design Lab, which combines AI and behavioural insights to support the policy transformation process. She will talk to us today about how behavioural insights can work for policymaking. Thank you very much, and now I yield the floor to Imen.
Thank you for the invitation. It's a pleasure today for me to share part of the experience and experimentation we're going to run. So today my talk will focus on two experiences, as I have a double hat. As Anna presented, I've been developing a product for the parliamentarian to support the lawmaking process and decision makers in the lawmaking cycle with information and with using technology in a way that we can introduce some nudges from behavioral insight and to make it more salient, timely, and reduce some biases. And the other hat I have today is to run for the first time in Tunisia, to be inside as a behavior researcher inside the government unit and the cabinet of Ministry of Technology, where I'm in charge of the implementation of the governmental decree. It's the 777. It's called here JOG 777, which will set up the whole socle for the digital transformation and the eGov in the Tunisian administration. So from my side here, what I'm observing today is to be in the implementation phase, which comes after the lawmaking and the parliament, the way how parliamentarians used to make the law. Our observation and role today is to see how we are able to implement this law and make profit of lesson learned from the behavioral science, especially that the mission we have today is to introduce a new work culture among administrative agent, but also among the whole administration sector, public administration sector, because the governmental decree, the 777, is supposed to operate the whole dematerialization project. So to start, let me just quickly introduce and part of the prototype we developed for Parliament and quickly, and then go into the experience of designing the nudges we are designing now with the Cabinet of Technology and the Prime Ministry Office, which is the organ within the ministry in charge of the public sector reform. So as the change theory, what we have done with the product, the package we brought to the parliamentarian was the GOVINOV package, the brand, as we presented. It's a tool to help decision maker to get less impacted by and biased by the knowledge management and the way how the parliamentarian, they consume information and they make decisions. So our product come using AI in a way to do automation of legislative texts and legal texts, and the idea was to do a simplification of the whole complex content and reduce the hurdle of access to the information, especially when it comes later to the function of voting, debating, and coming with a vote on law. So to bring information to manage the whole the big amount of information, and be able to bring it to the parliamentarian as a parliamentary assistant, a robo-helper or robo-gov assistant. So this product is still on prototyping now, and we are improving better the reasoning of the AI in a way that it gets improved its performance. And now I will focus more into the mission we're doing today. So how we used Behavioural Insight to support the public administration and the digital transformation. And the mission, the main mission was around not only introducing the dematerialization, but also setting up a series of practices to get into public agents to use more electronic documents and using email and the exchange, but also in getting administration and sectorial administration in a way that they introduce the interoperability, which is a way how we introduce the culture of data exposure and data consumption, which is a component that requires, apart from the technical and the technological capacities, it also requires that we work on the trust component and help the ministerial sector to get into this culture of getting the data seen and to see, visualize other ministries' data in order to be able to bring a proper offer of tech service of technology e-services. So our interventions mainly were about, firstly, in understanding the context. So this is what I will explain later, the session and the workshops we run with the public sector. And with the idea of introducing, our intervention would be around improving the compliance of administrative users, including also citizens as a future user of e-services, to the standards that the governmental decree dictated of the 777. And the idea and the objective of our mission was to operationalize, in a way, the implementation of the decree, but also to help build this new culture and incentivize the fundamentals of digital transformation and digital trust. So our other approach we've been doing was a combination of not bringing public sector official to become behavioral practitioner or behavioral scientist, but the idea was mainly to introduce them to the methodology and how to bring also the culture of experimentation, because or bring in the research culture and informing how we get to measure, test, learn, and adapt or adjust. So the idea of borrowing some concept of the composition, another perspective, introducing them to another perspective in this workshop of problems, let's say problem decomposition, and getting them into how they get the behavioral methodology to be able to understand the behavioral barriers, what we call in general the change resistance, and understand and give the tools to inform and analyze and map this behavioral barrier and map them into, we choose the ABCD toolkit and the basic toolkit of the OECD, and it was better for this to take in this exercise the mapping according to the ABCD lenses, because we won't get them into learning all the behavioral biases, but at least to be able to map the hurdles or the resistance into three big families, whether it's an attention barrier, whether it's the belief barriers, or barriers rooted into the determination or into the choice preferences. And it was an interesting perspective, because getting to have public sector agents who are in charge mainly in this four big stakeholders, let's say, because these are general directorate in charge of the dissemination of this new law or the new structure or the new way of working, and how we can change the way how to implement and do public policy. And it's relevant in a way because we were able to embrace both, to see how the agent here, public sector agent, were able to work and implement, let's say, conventional public or to implement law with the conventional classical public policy tools, and how they were able also to get into the use of innovative methods such as behavioral insight. So what is also interesting in this perspective is we are preparing also sort of a new culture that it used to be seen in a way that it's doing experimentation and was not reassuring for the culture of public sector and public agent. But in a way, when we introduced the heuristic and the scientific methodology of developing our cities and the methodology of our cities or other scientific method was more, made it more welcome as a method. And now they're not anymore afraid of the experimentation word or experiment word, which is interesting as an observation. And I will present quickly three main sector or domain of intervention. One that is linked to the whole simplification culture and in introducing the administrative instrument into getting public agent in using national platforms for exchange, using mails and getting the objective of zero paper. And this was done with the General Directorate of Reform and Public Sector Reform. And then another axe also relevant with the implementation and the dissemination of e-service culture and the way how agents will be able to change the way how they deliver service and put service online and dematerialize the service with a certain rules. And we are already in the pre-launch, the pre-launch of this déjà set up bouquet of service of e-service available. But now, even when I see the teams of the electronic administration unit, they are more aware and more sensitive to the user and consumption experience, how the public agent would be able to handle this and look to the environment. They started having this perspective after this training of thinking about the environment and how the user will get this product and how their product will get to be used or it exists or to enhance the user's rate. Then an interesting component that this one we already finished the workshops with this stakeholder, and we're going now into starting planning the nudges, and it's really interesting, I find, in a way, because it's about not only supporting the interoperability system, but also introducing the culture of data use and how we can share data and introduce the culture of trust. And we came to the observation after the workshops and the mapping of the behavioral barrier, the trust, and how we can shape the intervention around promoting trust among ministerial sectors and to expose their data and use others ministries' data, but also in another level to support the transformation of this center, which is called the National Computing Center, and help it to become the national operator for interoperability, which would be the center where they will manage all the platforms for service and introduce also to the program of the once only and all the cultural change that will come into the public sector practices. So what is relevant about, and I will show slightly the deployment planning, where we're almost in the middle of the deployment. And what I would focus and take into account as relevant planning to do the intervention now is to see what I noticed is this pressing of it as a whole context of transition in country as Tunisia, becoming a transitional democracy. And it's relevant to see that the way how we can assess the access of it, the two pressing needs of having an incumbent role to the parliament to have an oversight role over public policy, and a pressure or a pressing need of government to perform and deliver good public services, is the equation where we thought that between these two needs, pressing needs and pressing new roles, we have a big chantier of intervention where we need not only to work on equipping with technical skills, but also with the changing a lot of the culture of work. So the culture of using data, accessing data, having liability over that, changing the mindset of the public sector workers who are still shifting the paradigm from the legacy of dictatorship, where control and sort of a strong administrative role, that now it's shaken by the redevability of civil society support, who oversights their performance and see whether they are able to deliver a proper e-service or get a proper access to their data, the way how the state is dealing with personal data and people data. And it's interesting in a way because I see that BI and Behavioural Insight has a big role, and it can really, I see it already in the first trial here, that there is a need and a big need and a role to play with introducing already the evidence-based culture and informing decision, using research, bringing more research information into advising the policy making, but also having the culture of pressing some change or being able to work ethically on nudges that works and that help people shift into good behavior, especially that if we speak, as we see, the directorate is the public sector reform directorate. So I think there are many, this is like a small aspect of the reform, because there are still needed also big structural reform. And BI can be one of the methodology that can support this. To give just quickly some ideas about the possible nudges that we are developing. For example, to give it quickly, we are planning to, in consultation with the National Center for Interoperability, to introduce some sort of letting you interministerial data in a pre-engagement form. So they're not supposed to engage directly, but just to try this and play with this, and then be able later to pledge or to get a default engagement later to start develop an integrated service or develop an integrated service. That's it. And with for example, also the DGRPA, which is the Direction for Public Sector Reform, we're working mainly on simplification, and especially how to develop a simplification toolkit, and get also to address the attention biases and the belief formation biases, into getting the public agent to comply better and be more into digital channels, and abandon the paper, into getting paperless processes. So I will give maybe later in a future development after we register the intervention, a proper wrap up of the intervention and how we will go in this experimentation. So Another aspect relevant, it's another stakeholder, two other stakeholders that are also relevant that we are approaching now because we started to work with them lately, are the National Agency for Internet Security and the National Agency for Electronic Certification. These are also an interesting perspective to get products from public. These are products for certification, like the DigiGo, it's an electronic signature, and security agency. They have product for security that they need not only to get public agent to use them in their work culture, but also to get citizens and private sector to get to use this product. So apart from the regulation aspect, is also how to promote this, to get these products and the culture of security, the internet, the culture of getting certification is to introduce it little by little and observing this. And I think it would be relevant also in a way because we can design trials, depends what the Ministry of, depends of the audiences, education people or into the banking, some private sector companies. So these are also another, it's among the stakeholders, but it's another case. So to go through the whole experience of this is that we've seen the main behavioral barrier that intervenes into this culture, changing culture, work culture in public sector. It would be, we noticed that mainly the behavioral barrier we have the attention biases. So people are not able to manage an amount of information, the way how the law is released and communicated to the agent is supposed to be known, which is not the case. So this is a way also to know how to change the way how they communicate inside internal communication and how government communicates to citizens and to among himself. So this is an interesting reflection. That's why part also of main behavioral intervention will be combined with a sort of a communication strategy and support the communication strategy of the government around the digital transformation component. Thank you. I hope it was not too long and I'm happy to answer your questions.
Thank you very much, Imen, for your presentation. As a word of reminder, please ask your questions either in the questions tab, or you can also upvote other questions, or you can raise your hand and then you will be allowed to enter on the stage and ask the question in person. So the first question is, how was the culture of data usage changed during the implementation process?
Actually, we started the data usage is interesting, especially with the National Operability Center. But we designed the intervention with them. It's a co-design process, and we pre-started a sort of to consult with the possible users and to detect some use cases. We didn't started the intervention, the BI intervention yet, but we just started a sort of group of practice, and we initiated this culture of making two ministerial sector together and explore together their needs, co-design together their service, and see where in this map they can see the intervention of the data of one another. And from this offline model, we want to modelize it or to use this pattern to later become a process online within as a platform of the National Center for Interoperability, where any ministerial sector will be able to see how he can use his data with other ministries and how he can if he wants to design a new service, how he can have sort of this group of practice that help him in the design of his service. Especially, for example, for sort of basic data like from Ministry of Interiors, you need it for even any social service, for example, to have, for example, data like date of birth, place of birth. These are like STEM by default data. But then in order to develop the service, what are the other actors that can combine and come up in this adventure?
All right, thank you very much. We have another question from Adil. What were the cultural challenges, if any, in convincing stakeholders that change can be achieved through evidence?
It's a very interesting question and relevant. It's a daily practice with the stakeholders, because in the beginning, I think it comes from, it's a bit anecdotal, but the way that they need to deal with this new, it's an innovative policy. It's a new subject for them. It's something they don't know yet. So they're taking sort of any medicine that or any methodology that can be helpful to support the deployment. It would be relevant for this. And it's true, they're not used to it's not easy for them to, the experimentation word is difficult for them, because especially even link it to the political context of a transition. So any governments have a sort of a performance that he needs to prove. And if he experiments, that means a bit that they don't know and they are exploring. But the relevance of introducing this is to tell them that we have evidence from research, the way how it's the methodology, how we take this evidence is something that reassures them and can tackle the challenges, and it brings more trust when they see it's a scientific methodology. They say, okay, at least they are somehow protected by the results, because the process in itself is scientific.